Hi, this is Rachel from Little Bird Quilting. Happy Valentine's Day! And today we're going to be creating this paper pieced heart. This is going to be the paper pieced heart that we're going to be creating. And to make it, we need to have a pattern. This pattern is available at littlebirdquilting.com under downloads, and there's going to be a link below for you to be able to just click on. So for paper piecing, there are some things that are useful to have. First of all, you need to have your pattern, and I always trim off any excess paper that is around my pattern because it can just get in the way. So I'm just trimming up to about 1/8 inch away from the outer line, which the outer line for this pattern is my 1/4 inch seam allowance. You need to make sure that when you're doing paper piecing that you know where your seam allowance is, because not all patterns will include a line for your seam allowance. This is an 1/4 ruler, which you'll be seeing me use in a little bit, and you're going to need an iron and something to use as a stiff edge to be able to fold your paper over. So what I want to talk about first is how I figure out what size piece of fabric I need for each section of my paper piecing pattern. I always use a ruler, and I lay the ruler on top of the section that I need to cover, and I decide how much. I usually go 1/2 inch beyond each side of the area I want to cover, just to make sure I have enough fabric. So I usually take a copy of my pattern and write down the size of fabric I want for each section, and then I actually stack them up in the order that I'm going to be applying them to the pattern. So this one's going to be A, B, C, and so on. So that, you know, I just have to grab my next piece and I know that's the one that goes in the next spot. So what we're going to do, let me get this up here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. When you're paper piecing, you are sewing on the side that has the pattern. All of your fabric goes on the back side, the blank side. I always tell people, if you are a beginning paper piecer, one good thing to do is to start off using batiks, because then you don't have to worry about your right side and the wrong side, because batiks are the same on both sides. The pattern's the same. So what I'm going to do, and if you really enjoy paper piecing, there are actual special papers that people have made. This is vellum. It's transparent, and the one cool thing about it is when I put my fabric underneath, I can actually see my fabric through the paper. But today we're going to go ahead and just use regular old copy paper. It works exactly the same. So all I'm going to do, since I can't see through it very well, I'm going to hold it up to the light so that I can see the shadow of my fabric to know that I'm covering the whole area that I want covered. And I have it covered right there. And I also have shortened the stitch length on my machine to about 1.5. The reason I do that is because I want the paper to be perforated a lot, so it's easier to remove it when I am done sewing all of my pieces on. So now I've sewn 2 pieces to the back, and what I did is I put one piece down and then I laid the other one on top of it, because this is where my seam line is that I was sewing. So you can use an iron to press that up. So now I'm going to make sure my fabric is open and laying flat, and I'm going to take that stiff edge and I'm going to lay it where I want to sew my next 2 pieces on. So we sewed piece A to piece B, and now I'm going to take my pattern in that stiff edge and I'm going to fold it up and over, and I'm going to put a crease. And this is where my 1/4 ruler is going to come in. I'm going to use it, and I'm just going to slide it up against the edge of the paper, and I'm going to cut everything that's beyond that off. So now I know my next piece of fabric goes right here, because see, that's A3. So I'm going to take A3 and I'm going to place it on, and I'm going to hold it up to the light to make sure that when it is flipped up, that it's going to be covering that whole section, and it is. So I'm going to position him back down and bring it over to the sewing machine. And when you're sewing, you also want to make sure that you're starting, if you're at the edge of your pattern, that you're starting beyond your seam allowance, because you want stitches along the edge where that pattern's at. So I'm going to flip this back over. So I've done A3, and you need to make sure all your fabric is laying flat on the back side. I'm going to do A4. So I'm going to take my little piece of plastic that's stiff and fold my paper up, and I'm just pulling that seam out because it's, it's just where it's attached to the paper, and I am going to cut everything off that's beyond there. And I'm going to open it back up. So now I'm going to take my next piece, place it on, and I'm going to hold it up to the light to make sure that when it flips up, it covers all the area that I want covered, and it does. And we're going to sew that on. That's going to be the white section up above the top portion of the heart. And you don't have to iron in between each. They actually sell these little like rollers that are like a little presser. And for the most part, that gets it flat enough. Sometimes you want to, make sure it's really flat. So now we've done A1, A2, A3, A4. Now we're going to do A5. I'm going to prep that by folding the paper up over, trimming off everything that's beyond that. And now I'm going to take my next piece, place him down, hold him up to the light to make sure that when he folds up, he's going to cover everything, and he is. And I always I oversize my pieces a little bit. Like when I'm measuring out what size they need to be, I always go at a ½ inch on each side just to make sure that that piece is big enough. You do end up with, cutting off some fabric, but you just can't get the sharp edges that you can get with paper piecing by piecing things together. It's just a different look, and sometimes it's just nice. So like this, I'm gonna be cutting off a lot of fabric, but that's gonna be okay for this project. So now I'm going to be doing A6, which is a big piece. I'm gonna lay him down, lift him up to the light to make sure that when he flips up, he's gonna be covering all of that area, and he is. So let me go ahead and get that piece stitched down. This is a big part of the heart, so I'm going to go ahead and press this larger piece of fabric just because I want it to be nice and flat. Now I'm going to be doing, I did A6, so now I'm going to do A7. And you do want to make sure that you are doing these pieces in the order that, the numerical order that they're supposed to be done in, because a lot of times you can't put one piece of fabric on until you've put the previous one on. It builds on each other. So let's go ahead and get, this is going to be the other corner, the little white section above the other side of the heart. And let me get, I'm going to go ahead and press that up. And whoop. Now I'm going to move on to number 8. I'm going to slice that off. Flip him back over. This is going to be the last piece of red that I need to put down. I'm going to make sure that it's going to cover everything I want covered, and it does. Put that back under. Oh, don't want to sew those pieces down. So this is going to be the last of the red. And it's just a fun little block to make. And there are tons of free paper piecing patterns out there. If you just did a search, you can pretty much find anything. I've seen it, flamingos, bumblebees, trees, you name it, you can make it paper piece, and it just has a very nice realistic or more realistic look to them rather than piecing. So let's go ahead. I'm going to make sure that piece is where I want him to be. This is a second to last piece. Get him sewn down. Make sure you're going out to that outside edge line because that is your seam allowance. Go ahead and just use the roller this time. Now we're going to be doing our last section, which is A10. And I will show you, this ruler has a bezeled edge, which is intended for you to actually use to fold your paper up. I don't use that just because it's a new feature for the add a quarter ruler. So I've always just used a postcard or, you know, my piece of plastic with some tape on it. So it's been, I just don't remember to use the edge of the ruler. So let me go ahead and put down, this is going to be our last piece. Whoop, my fabric got twisted up a little bit. Making sure he's in the right spot. You do this last stitch line. And give it one last press. I'm going to flip this over and trim it so that you get to see what the heart, because there's a lot of extra fabric going on right now. So I'm trimming it up to the seam allowance line, which is a 1/4 inch away from my pattern. So there we go. We've got a nice little heart. He's a foundation paper pieced heart. Thanks for watching. We made this wonderful little heart that I plan on turning into a table runner. If paper piecing is something you enjoy doing, there's also an additional pattern for a star on my website, littlebirdquilting.com. It is free to download, and we hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Bye-bye. Today we're going to be, one more time with the finger. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed what